Today, I'm going to be giving you guys some of the biggest news in pro wrestling, and I'm going to give you guys my honest and genuine reactions. We're going to talk a little bit about AEW before we get to WWE. We got to talk about Jeff Hardy because it looks like Jeff Hardy will be taken off of TV from AEW. According to Fightful Select, they have reported that due to Jeff's past arrest, he is not able to fly into Canada, and AEW has several weeks of shows in different Canadian cities in the coming weeks, which is why he will be taken off of TV for a little bit. And honestly, I mean, I think we all kind of saw this coming. We all kind of knew what this was expected. And look, the reality is this: Jeff Hardy made a lot of mistakes, and you know, this is the consequence, right? The most important thing I think that a lot of people take from my I hope that you take from my content is that these are humans, right? Jeff Hardy has battled his demons. We know this. We've seen this. It's played out in front of us. Sometimes it's even been incorporated into storylines, right? This is not something that people aren't aware about. Jeff Hardy being taken off of TV is a non-issue for me. I don't feel like the Hardys are in this massive program where they need to be on TV. And maybe that was good planning ahead of time from Tony Khan, knowing that they'd be going to Canada, right? But at the end of the day, I think it is really important for AEW and Jeff Hardy to have a good relationship. And we've seen AEW become very supportive of Jeff Hardy during, you know, some of the lowest of lows. And I think that's a really good thing. And that is something that you could respect a lot about AEW, regardless of how you feel about their product, their decisions, things like that. One thing is they are definitely very, very supportive, and they try to be of assistance to their wrestlers when things get rough. Jeff Hardy has made those mistakes. These are the consequences of those mistakes. But maybe Jeff Hardy doesn't need to be wrestling all the time. You know, maybe personal health and just, you know, maybe that should be the priority. And I think the less that Jeff Hardy wrestles, the more special it will be when he does. I think that also helps. But yeah, Jeff Hardy's not going to be on TV. Kind of expected. I think we all kind of knew this was coming. Sounds like AEW did as well. Otherwise, he would have been in a massive program. But we'll see what happens when he comes back. Really, I'm curious to know if AEW will ever give Jeff and Matt Hardy a tag team title reign. But we'll see when the time comes, if it ever does. Guys, we got to talk about John Morrison. Yeah, so this is a fun one. PW Insider came out with some very interesting news. According to PW Insider, backstage sources have indicated that John Morrison's official ring name in AEW will either be Johnny Television or Johnny TV, and he is expected to become a regular presence in AEW going forward. Now, this shouldn't necessarily be shocking, right? Because we know Taya Valkyrie is in the company. We know that she's doing some good stuff out there in AEW. But yeah, it's interesting because without, you know, spoiling anything, we know that John Morrison previously was known in AEW as Johnny Elite. And this guy, I don't know. I don't know, now I feel like it's a rib, right? Like, this guy constantly has a new name wherever he goes, and I just think it's so funny. I feel like whoever's going to be doing commentary for the show that he's on, good luck to them, because you're going to call him Johnny Nitro, John Morrison. You're going to call him all of these different names, and obviously rightfully so, right? This guy has many identities. John Morrison's a great talent, right? I really do genuinely believe it. It looks like he's going to be coming into AEW full-time. Sounds like he may have signed a new deal of some sort. Maybe it's per appearance, but obviously PW Insider saying that he is going to be a regular presence going forward. I mean, it sounds like there is something happening. But it's interesting. Why would they call him Johnny Television or Johnny TV? And I think there's a lot of things that would make sense for that, but I don't want to spoil that for you all. So we're going to just leave it at that. But I will say this. I do want to point out John Morrison's great talent. I don't know if there's like an actual plan for him to work AEW and have like these massive programs. There's a lot of people, right? There's a lot of people on the roster who still aren't being used consistently. Maybe there's other people in line that I think could be really good for a title reign or whatever it may be, or for a big push. But I don't think this is like a hire that necessarily hurts AEW, right? Using John Morrison on TV is not a big deal. It just depends how they book him, right? If they're trying to shoot him straight to the top, I think that could be an issue. But if they're using him in a different capacity, I don't think that's a big deal. And I think that is definitely not a concern for me. Probably won't be a concern for you. And he's entertaining, right? And I think with AEW, you definitely want to have the entertaining guys come in too, because it definitely makes the show more fun. But we'll see what it leads to. All right, guys, we got to talk to you a little bit about LA Knight. Yeah. Okay, so here's the deal. This was really interesting. I found this article to be very insanely cool, and I'll tell you guys why. Speaking with Daily Mail, LA Knight was talking about his repackage, and he talked about the internal concern from WWE about his age, and that essentially was why he was turned into a manager. He caught the attention of WWE officials after working a dark match, and basically they liked him a lot, right? And one of the big things that he heard was some whispers of him being 40 years old, and specifically saying he's 40, danger. Obviously, this is a load of crap, right? And I feel like if WWE's mindset, Vince McMahon, and granted, this was Vince McMahon's WWE, it's different, right? He went back to being LA Knight. He's getting this push. He's on television. But I feel like the most detrimental thing you could do in the world of pro wrestling is put a limitation on somebody's growth and development and star power just because of their age. Wrestling in 2023, especially LA Knight, relatively healthy. Like this guy, I mean, you don't hear of injuries. You don't hear of issues with this guy, backstage issues. You don't hear of this stuff with him. The idea that age is a concern or was a concern for WWE, this is not the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? This is not the early 2000s. This is not like, this is a whole different era, right? And modern medicine too has definitely improved. I think the idea of not pushing someone because they're 39, 40 years old, I think is ridiculous. Now, at the end of the day, I think you should push them, right? And this is why I disagree with WWE's mentality at the time, because you can push that guy, and then if you have NXT and you're building up the Braun Breakers and the Carmelo Hayes and all those people, right? You essentially have a good top name at LA Knight, let's say 43, 44, 45 years old. Then when he's ready to hang it up, whenever that may be, there is somebody in NXT who can benefit from working with this guy. So I never understood this mentality of why it wouldn't work. I think the old age thing was ridiculous, and that's why I thought this to be such a fascinating story, especially now that he's getting a push and he could very well become Mr. Money in the Bank. Dave Meltzer is saying that the brand split is no more. I'm confused by this. He says it was reported that the brand split is seemingly over with little to no explanation, and he says that this also didn't come to a surprise to anybody. I don't know if the brand split is actually over, right? WWE had the Money in the Bank contestants that came from SmackDown. They arrived on Raw, and to be honest, I don't really like. I think the issue is WWE has a brand split and they have a draft, and people don't expect intertwined stories between the two shows. And I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with that. As long as you're acknowledging the fact that they're from SmackDown and that's the reason why they're there, I think that's okay. Now, is WWE truly over with the brand split? If they are, I think that's a big mistake. I actually genuinely believe if you're over with the brand split, you don't care about the Raw and SmackDown rosters, if you're truly done with it, I think that's a big issue. I think that actually hurts in the long run. It's the same reason why I want AEW to be strict with the brand split. But I do have to put this out there that this is coming from Meltzer. And I think maybe there's some confusion because there's intertwined stories from both shows, right? Obviously, you got to have them show up on both shows if the stories are intertwined. And if it makes sense and it's logical, right? It makes sense because it's Money in the Bank. I don't see an issue with that. Obviously, when you have the tag team champions, they're undisputed. They're going to be on both shows. I'm okay with that. I could be okay with that. What I can't be okay with is WWE just completely disregarding it regardless, right? And I don't factor NXT into the thing, so that's okay with me. But I just think it's an issue. If WWE is truly done with the brand split, I think it's dumb. I think it's problematic. I don't think that's a good idea.